You love her voice, you love her looks. What Melissa loves is talking to Ray McKay. Hi, everybody. So this is my birthday month, and I have been doing interviews for my birthday month with some friends. And I had reached out to my friends and asked if they wanted to talk to me about the Golden Age of comic books, or if they wanted to talk about a specific character or a specific issue from the Golden Age. And a couple of people have said yes, and one of them is with me right now, and it's Ray McKay. Say hi to my small but very nice audience, Ray.
Hi, everyone.
That works. All right. So Ray has chosen two superheroes that we're going to talk about. We're going to get to them really soon. But a couple of notes first. So I had originally talked about doing 4 interviews. My plan was I was going to do one for every week of my birthday month. And I was hoping to find a really big name person that would come do this to close out the month, like a grand finale. But none of them have worked out. So this may be my last one. And how you feel about that, Ray? Hope there's no extra pressure.
Well, I'm definitely not very big name, so sorry to disappoint in that avenue, but I just hope we can have a good time talking about some Golden Age comics because it's a really rare opportunity to get a chance to talk about sort of these more obscure, older, like public domain Golden Age characters. Like usually at Comic-Cons, you can talk to people about like Daredevil or, Captain America or Absolute Batman, but it's very rare that you find a chance to talk to somebody about like Pyroman or the Black Terror or the Atomic Thunderbolt or Amazing Man. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, you're not going to meet your average fan in the comic book store and be able to talk about those characters and have them go, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about." So it is nice. Thanks for the internet, people that made the internet, because it really helped those of us who are into niche characters like this be able to reach out to each other. So there's that.
Absolutely.
There's a couple other things I wanted to say first too. So I feel I was remiss in my first 2 interviews that I didn't talk about how I knew the people. So my first interview was with Matt Hansel. Matt Hansel and I knew each other from we did public library Comic Cons together. I was a vendor at them. He was selling his artwork, and we had tables by each other. So I got to know him that way. James Satter and I are friends because of how I know most of my friends from gaming. And after playing in a few games together, then he discovered my role-playing game. That's what I mean by gaming, not video gaming. And then he became a fan, and we started writing together. So there's that. And then Ray and I didn't really talk at all until we started planning for this video. And now we've got to talk about a lot of great comic book stuff together. But we know each other. Our link to each other is something that we also share with Matt Hansel, that we're part of the Big Bang family. And that's what Gary Carlson calls everyone who has ever contributed to Big Bang Comics. He calls us his family, and I think that's really great. And I thought we should take a minute to just appreciate Gary Carlson and his co-creator Chris Ecker, and what great people they are and what they've done for us.
I couldn't agree more. I have nothing but great things to say about Gary. He has been an incredible collaborator, mentor, friend, and just I love working with him. I love getting to do Big Bang comics. It's just such a blast, and he's such a terrific guy. And Chris is amazing too. Right now we're working on the latest issue of Big Bang Comics, and I've been back and forth with both of them a bit on coming up with some new villains for the character Amphibia Man, and it's a really fun time.
I'm glad that you get that experience. They are great guys. I've really enjoyed my chance to work with them too. Well, too long on that, because we do have 2 characters that we're going to devote the rest of our time to, and that is talking about the Black Terror and Pyroman. And those are the characters that you chose for us today. And I thought maybe you'd want to talk a little bit about why you chose those characters. But before we do, one more digression. Something that's really interesting about these characters is the company that they come from and the confusing nature of what to call it. There's 4 names that this company is known by: Pines, Standard, Nedor, and Better. And there seems to be some confusion as to which one is which, or if they're all valid. So did you want to address that before we get into the characters?
I mean, I think it's really interesting, but I have to preface with just I am by no means an expert on this. A lot of my information comes from either FizzFop YouTube videos or Wikipedia searches, just because I'm really interested in like the history of Golden Age comics and how that all came together. But to the best of my knowledge, Nedor, the publisher that published like the Black Terror and Pyroman, was one of sort of three publishers owned by Ned Pines. And the three different publishers all published different magazines and comics and characters that were eventually rolled into Standard Comics near the end of sort of like the big Golden Age comics boom. And Standard Comics was the one that lasted the longest, but they were all run by the same guy, at least to the best of my knowledge. I wish I knew more about it, and it's funny. I'm really hoping we can get him on your show at some point. Someone who could really speak to this is Roy Johnson, who runs Setting the Standard in Comics, which is sort of a pseudo revival of the characters and concepts started by Standard Comics in the 40s that has sort of basically making comics as if Standard Comics continued on into the Silver and Bronze Age of comics. But Roy's company is quite literally named Standard Comics, so I feel he definitely knows the history a bit better than I do.
You hear that out there? You're being called out. You can come on the show if you want to the last week to yourself. He's a shy, quiet guy. So we'll see if we hear back from him after this challenge. But yeah, it's a really complex situation. You're right that Pines is like the top name. That's Ned Pines. He's the publisher. And then Nedor and Better are two lines that are incorporated. So Better Comics or Better Publications, that's what it's called. Better Publications is incorporated, and then Nedor is incorporated separately from that. And this is really a very common practice in the Golden Age and even into the 50s, where different companies will use different sub-companies to distribute their materials, so that if one of them goes, they have to like close down one of them because they're interested in the Black Terror and Pyroman. Or let's start with Black Terror and then we'll do Pyroman. So let's talk about this guy here. I don't have a lot of comic books to share with you, but you might. All right. This is what he looks like, and you're going to tell us why we should be interested in him.
Well, I think most people would agree the most striking thing about the Black Terror is the costume.
Yeah,
the costume.
I kind of thought you'd lead with that because that's why I held him up. It is a very striking costume and very memorable.
It is. I mean, I would love to know if the Punisher was at all inspired by him at some point, because it's the all black with the skull logo on the chest. It was striking in the 70s when the Punisher did it. It's still striking today when it appears sort of in his revival from Project Superpowers, where he's sort of more pirate themed. He's got the glowing skull and crossbones on his chest. So I have to imagine how eye-catching it would have been in the 1940s. Just the all black with the skull and crossbones. Very intimidating. But I find the Black Terror interesting because he's a very classic Golden Age superhero. You know, a pharmacist, Bob Benton, is being shook down by gangsters. And as the gangsters leave, they just sort of rough up an orphan at the side of the street. Bob takes the orphan inside, who knocks over some chemicals, and it gives both of them superpowers. And immediately after getting superpowers, Bob grabs himself a costume and goes to beat up the gangsters. And that begins sort of his war on crime as the Black Terror. And from then on, he would go on to fight supervillains, Nazis, gangsters, you name it. And he lasted a lot longer than most other sort of Golden Age superheroes. I think his comics eventually dwindled off around 1949, whereas most of like the classic Golden Age superheroes that really sort of came to prominence during World War II died out around like 1944, 1945 after the war, you know?
There was definitely a dwindling of the genre by 49. 49 is when Pines stops publishing comic books. So it's possible that if Pines had stayed in the comic book business, that Black Terror would have ran even longer. Mm-hmm. there was a lot of companies were bailing around between 49 to 53, thinking that this just wasn't for them any longer.
Mhm.
So there's that. You raised a lot of good points. I will only add that there's a lot of precedent already for the Black Terror. He's got
Mhm.
the mild bitterness of Clark Kent. He's also got chemistry thing going for him that Batman has with Robin. So I think
Yeah.
that his author is Richard Hughes, is the man that created this character, and I think that he was looking at all of these characters that were very successful for DC Comics, and he thought, well, how do I mix them all up together and make a character that synthesizes all these things that are working for them? And I think that's how you get Black Terror, just all wrapped up in a very prominent, eye-catching costume, and I think that's one of the reasons why Black Terror works so well, because he put all that thought into it.
Absolutely. Like the Clark Kent parallels are especially interesting when you think about Bob Benton's main love interest was his secretary, Jean Starr, who loved the Black Terror. She was a huge fan of his. She thought he was this amazing hero. Couldn't stand Bob Benton, thinks he's just kind of a loser. But what I find really interesting about sort of that dynamic is she finds out he's the Black Terror like in the Golden Age comics. Like it does not take her long to learn his secret identity, whereas Lois Lane I don't think learned until the 90s, right before Superman got killed by Doomsday.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing you bring up. That was an editorial decision by DC Comics that they were never going to allow that relationship to move forward. Uh, Jerry Siegel had there's a story that's floating around the internet
Hmm.
that Jerry Siegel had written a story that would have moved things forward for the characters, and it was shut down by DC Comics. And we know that Jerry was not totally opposed to that notion. He had a previous pair of characters, much less famous, Bart Regan's spy and his partner Sally, wound up getting together and becoming a serious couple in another DC comic book. And so he could have gone that route, right? That could have happened for those two characters, and they never allowed it to. But other characters saw this as a potential possibility to pursue. So Black Terror does it in this company, over in another company. Um, um, has been really hesitant to put superheroes and into relationships like that are going to last. Maybe a couple of years, and then think, oh, this is limiting our character somehow. We need to break them up. Peter Parker, Mary Jane, and then
Batman, Catwoman.
yeah. So all these things keep getting retconned back to square one, so that their heroes can pursue other women again. And we miss these things unless we pursue other characters like Black Terror that pursues the Clark Kent Lois Lane angle in a different direction. And then my example was Still Sterling is a character who has a love interest, and the two of them become closer to the same person. And he goes, that was a stupid idea. I'm just gonna give up trying.
Yeah,
All
I
right,
do
so
love, sorry, I love the
yeah,
concept of secret identities, but in real life, I think it would be almost impossible to actually hide it. Like, again, the issue I'm working on for Big Bang right now, we have the superhero's roommate just know who he is, like know he's got superpowers, know he's off doing this stuff, because you share a dorm room the size of a shoebox with somebody, they're gonna figure out when you're sneaking out the window to fight criminals.
great idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. We'll see how it goes, right?
All right.
Yeah.
So, anyways, back to our characters. So we've got a character that is built to work. He's a character that has all these things going for him. He's got the romantic interest. Jean Starr, I don't know. Maybe she becomes his secretary in time. In the beginning, she actually is the mayor's secretary, but maybe she changes jobs later on, or there's a retcon that happens. I'm not sure what the case is there.
I could have
Um,
that wrong. I thought she was his secretary, but I could 110% be wrong on that one. I'll be the first to admit I've read like a few Black Terror comics and I love the character, but it's really hard to find like those Golden Age appearances. Like most of my experience with him comes from reading the reprints that AC Comics did of them, sort of a Golden Age Men of Mystery and stuff like that. And I'm a big fan of Project Superpowers, but of course that doesn't really have much to do with the original comics. The Black Terror is much more of a pirate character in that one.
I bring that up. The only reason I correct you on that is because there is a theme that I've seen in the Black Terror, and I will also admit that I have only read a sampling of Black Terror stories, even though if you are okay with reading online copies, they're all there. They're in the public domain, and you can go to sites like Comic Book Plus, Digital Comic Museum, and you can read all the stories. But
so good.
They're very wonderful sites. Please support them, everybody. We got to keep those comic books free and accessible to everyone. But then my point was that there's a theme in the stories that I've read that Black Terror is very focused on corruption in the city. And that's why his pharmacy is located right across the street from the city hall. And Gene Starr is the mayor's secretary, and he knows the comptroller. It's like the only comptroller character that ever appears in comic books. So it's not a position that's, that leaps off the lips when you're thinking comic books. But all these things factor into that Richard seems to have had. And I don't, again, I'm speculating here. I'm not sure how long Richard actually wrote the comic books and before it passed into other hands. But I think that at least early on, there was definitely a interest in having this be like a kind of like a political statement that if you had a real life superhero, the first thing that they would tackle would be corruption in the city, not fighting muggers in alleys, but going after people that are cheating the system from inside the system. And I think that's a wonderful thing about Black Terror too. I think that a character works really well for that. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Just sort of on the themes overall that like pop up through the comics, or more like the Black Terror sort of tackling corruption?
Well, it doesn't have to be that, but you did mention earlier that he does eventually get to supervillains, right? That's a thing that every superhero gets to that part of the genre in time, but it certainly wasn't right away. For a long time, he's just fighting ordinary foes. And what did you see in terms of that? I mean, in the reprinted comic books that you read, are they just the stories where he's fighting supervillains, or are there other things that he's doing in the stories that you read?
It's a mix because, I'll manage to pick up an issue of Golden Age Men of Mystery here, an issue of like the Black Terror reprints there, or I'll just sort of be surfing through like Grand Comics database because I'm looking for inspiration for me trying to write a reboot of the Black Terror or something. But I was definitely drawn more to the supervillains just because it's a bit more like classic comic booky for me. But I do love when he fights sort of ordinary gangsters. Like I read all the original Batman Chronicles when I was younger, and yes, he fights the Joker, and eventually the Penguin shows up, and Scarecrow shows up at a certain point. But most of the time, it's just like gangsters and mobsters and racketeers. I love the word racketeers. It's so cool. And I think that's something that has been kind of lost a little bit in modern comics. It's always supervillains or big world-ending threats. It's never just like crime or like criminal families, which is another reason why Batman Year One is maybe my favorite like graphic novel ever, because there's no supervillains. It's just Batman versus the mob.
Yeah, and I think that's important because it grounds the character in some sense of reality. I think that if your character is always beating world-beating menaces, it can be fun, but it's not relatable in the sense that it's something that you would really hope that a superhero would exist to tackle. So I think that a mix of them is the right way to go. And I'm glad that you mentioned Batman. There are obviously a lot of parallels here between Batman and Black Terror, and we'll get to that. Yeah, there's a rogues gallery for Black Terror, but it's not a major part of.
I think his most iconic villain is probably Lady Serpent, who has like a collection of serpents and sort of a hypnotic gaze, and she would sort of have a gang of thugs that if they ever questioned her, she would stab them with a serpent venom dipped dagger to sort of make an example of them. And she pops up in a couple of issues, and she's been in a few of the revivals. She's the one that, this is the first issue of Golden Age Men of Mystery, and it's the Black Terror fighting Lady Serpent, drawn by the incomparable Mort Meskin and Jerry Robinson, which is amazing. And if I had to say it, I'd say she's probably his most iconic villain. But that's also just because I like snake-themed villains.
I gotta read that. I haven't read that story. Mort Metzkin, you just sold me on it, because I can't wait to talk about Mort when I get that far in my history of the Golden Age, because his artwork is amazing. When we talk about Jack Kirby being the master of dynamic action, I think he learned that from Mort Metzkin, because Jack Kirby was a good artist in the Golden Age. His artwork goes back that far. He was doing comic book artwork in the 40s, but he did not have that dynamic approach that we know him from the 60s until he saw Mort do it first. So that is real pedigree stuff that you just named. Good job on that.
Thank you. Thank you. I did my best.
Now, you brought up Rogues. No, I brought up Rogues Gallery, and then you gave me an example. I appreciate that. But the biggest connection to Batman is the sidekick. So let's talk about that. Batman's got Robin. We've got the Black Terror, and he's got Tim. Does
not nearly as inspiring as Robin, you know?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have that same sense of wonder to it. Just calling him Tim. Does he ever get like a special sidekick name, or is he always just Tim?
Well, he does. Technically, he's Kid Terror.
Okay, Kid Terror. I forgot about that. That's not a super.
So it's just the Black Terror and Tim, and I think it's kind of funny because the Black Terror is just so monumental, and Tim. I just think it's funny. Like, that should have been the series. The Black Terror and Tim.
I like that approach. I think they should keep that. Yeah, Kid Terror is not terrifying. If he's a terror and he's a kid, that just means that he runs around in stores and knocks things off the shelves and gets in trouble a lot. That's not terrifying in the same sense that a grown man that beats you up is. Although Tim has superpowers. And we'll talk about that too. Sorry,
go ahead.
Okay. I'll let you give me examples next. I want to talk about two things here. One is that random chance plays a huge role in the Black Terror's origin. He's a chemist that takes the formula that gives him his power, but doesn't even do it intentionally. The mistake that Tim does when he puts the wrong chemical in the batch that gives them their powers. And then he doesn't even pick out his own costume. He didn't make that costume. He sent Tim to a costume store to pick out a costume for him. And Tim just asked the owner of the store to recommend something. And this is like a masquerade costume or something. No, I'm sorry. This was from like an opera. This was an opera or a play, and I can't imagine what that would have been. But this is what he hands Tim, and he brings back to Bob, and Bob puts it on, and that's how he becomes the Black Terror. And what a different story it would be if he had not had this cool costume in his shop. Or if Tim had never dropped that into his into the concoction that he was making. Then the other point I wanted to bring up is that unlike how Batman creates Robin for Dick Grayson, this is like the opposite of that, where Tim basically creates Black Terror.
Yeah, he is the exact same power set and also costume as the Black Terror, which is kind of interesting. I don't love that they match. I think it's more interesting when there's a contrast between the superhero and the sidekick, like Batman and Robin or Captain America and Bucky. But there's also a precedent for superheroes and sidekicks just having the same costume. Like the Eagle and Buddy just wear the exact same thing. I just find it a little confusing because you just have to go off of height.
That makes sense too. Yeah. And he looks like just the midget version of the Black Terror, unless you know that he's being drawn as a kid. And that's not always clear depending on who the artist is.
Yeah, and his hair also changes colors depending on who the colorist is. Tim is either brown haired to contrast Bob's black hair, or he's blonde haired to contrast Bob's black hair, depending on what you're reading.
Comic books in the Golden Age, I think the coloring of those comic books was like the least concern that they had
Oh,
before
yeah.
those went out to press. There is so little attention to detail put in them. I've seen so many comic books where like one object will change color between panels
Mhm.
because no care is put into that at all.
Yeah, well,
And
I don't think they would have ever imagined that in the future, like people would still be reading these comics. Like comics came from the pulps, which were just supposed to be read and sort of tossed out. Like the fact that we're still talking about any of these characters today is a miracle, really. And I think it's awesome that they've continued on. But we do have to acknowledge that people were rushing to meet deadlines. There's stories about like the Nedor bullpen. They would have to crank out 2 stories a day. Like you are not double checking that if you're cranking out 2 a day. I can't imagine doing that. I'm lucky if I can get a 10-page comic done in a week, and that's
that's
rushing for
pretty
me.
good. That's pretty good. But yeah, it was very, we're working very different times where, mind you, when you and I do something like this, it's for the love of the medium. We're not
Hmm.
making a living off of this. And these people, to make a living off of this, had to crank this out at an amazing pace. And it
Mhm.
really takes an amazing skill set to be able to pull this off. I mean, those artists that were able to crank out stories that fast, that is just an astonishing level of talent that a lot of artists today would not be able to keep up with at all. They they would be they would be like breaking their hands trying to do the artwork that they do at the speed that they had to do back then. And a lot of the time, granted, a lot of stories are repetitive.
Mhm.
Um, there may be very small differences sometimes in how the bad guys are defeated. Um, there's a lot of formula to it, but that's how you get those stories done fast enough. So what you're doing when you're reading all these stories is looking for those gem moments when they really either intentionally put a little extra work into it or by accident they managed to make something that was really amazing when they were cranking out all that hard work. And I think that may be why we're drawn to that, right? Because it's something that it's like looking for diamonds in the rough when you're looking through the golden age of comic books. And sometimes you get a gem like that. It's just a perfect story that comes together when you think that you're just cranking something out.
Yeah, I really do find it interesting that especially some comic writers, even like going into like the 70s and 80s that were just kind of there like doing jobs, would create like a masterpiece. Just the best example I can think of is not that he was a jobber in any way, shape, or form. I don't want to disparage his name at all, but Silent Interlude, that issue of G.I. Joe that's completely wordless, they kind of
Oh,
just happened upon that by accident. They didn't mean to like make it into this like classic that is still revered today. And it's one of the coolest comics I've ever read, Silent Interlude. I think it's issue 21 of the Marvel G.I. Joe series. They managed to tell the entire story without a single like dialogue bubble. Just blows my mind. Mhm.
so the Black Terror has powers, right? He and Tim both have powers,
Yes,
and
they do.
they've got what are those powers exactly? He's got super strength, right?
Yeah, he has super strength. Um, super strength. He's invulnerable. How invulnerable is not 100% clear. I think it's one of those things where it depends on what the writer needs, because bullets can bounce off of him, and he and Tim are seen like riding rockets into battle against the Nazis at one point. But there's also issues where like he's tied up and like is about to be dropped into like a vat of acid, or like put on a log that's going into like a buzzsaw thing. I don't know. It's like he's trapped in a
Yes.
saw.
Yeah, a sawmill.
And should that be able to kill him if bullets bounce off of him? It's not 100% clear, but that's one. And again, one of those things you love about Golden Age comics. And I like the idea that he's probably not 100% invincible, because being indestructible isn't the most interesting superpower, because you have to have sort of that danger that like your heroes could get injured or hurt or killed.
And for anyone that is reading this, or I'm sorry, for anyone that's watching this and doesn't read old comic books, you might be surprised that power levels were extremely variable in the Golden Age. Like there was not an official handbook of the Marvel Universe that told you exactly how much this character can lift and press. This was all just based off of what the writer needed from that character for this one story. So maybe bullets bounce off him today, but in the next story, he needs to get knocked out. So I've read 2 Black Terror stories where someone comes up behind him and knocks him out by hitting him over the head with the butt of a gun. So apparently he's maybe the back of his head is not invulnerable, like it's an Achilles heel.
Yeah, if he was shot in the back of the head, would it kill him? Or is it just being hit on the back of... Oh, there's this great YouTube channel called Solid JJ, where they just make fun of like old TV shows where it's Spider-Man's trying to stop some mobsters, and he gets hit over the head with a butt of a gun. He's like, "The butt of a gun, my one weakness." And then they hit him with a stick, and he's like, "A blunt object, my one weakness." And then they tie him up with rope, and he's like, "Rope, my one weakness."
That does sound funny. I'm not familiar with that one. You have to share a link with me later.
It's a good laugh.
I like that. Yeah, so this is something that goes back really far into comic books, and we see this all the way back to Superman too. Like Superman, for one story, can hold back a dam from breaking in his first year, and the rest of the time, he's much weaker strength than that, and it'll be a couple of years until his powers inflate again to that level in the comic books. And Black Terror has that already built into him, where his power levels vary. And we could explain this away too in character, that maybe that chemical mist that he breathes in varies from injection to injection. That sometimes it makes him stronger than others. That definitely makes more sense than a Kryptonian having strength that varies in intensity. And I don't know if anything was probably nothing was ever done with that in the Golden Age. I don't think they put a lot of meta thought into stuff like that, but I offer that to you as something to put into one of your Black Terror stories.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why I really like Hourman as a character, because he becomes Hourman. He's got the 1 hour, and then like he can't take another one of the pills for like 24 hours. So he's got 1 hour to do stuff. He's got to time it perfectly. And when he runs out, he's usually not in the best position. I don't know. It's one thing I just always found really interesting about the characters. There's always a clock on him.
Yeah, and I don't know if I don't know if that was ever done with Black Terror, but it could have been. That he had to work fast before that chemical wore off. I think that there may have been some missed opportunities with the character. Like I like what we were talking about, having Tim just be this ordinary kid hanging out with the Black Terror. No costume. Maybe he's got powers, but maybe he doesn't even need the powers.Maybe he just is the kid that hangs out with Black Terror, and I think that would make him a lot more interesting.
And if Tim doesn't have powers, then it means the Black Terror is invincible, but his partner isn't. So he has to work extra hard to make sure his partner doesn't get killed. It also makes you wonder if that's even worse child endangerment than Batman does, because Batman's a regular guy, Robin's a regular guy, but if you're invincible and you're taking a regular kid out with you to go fight mobsters, like, come on.
All right, that's a good point. That's a good point. He doesn't have to worry so much about Tim, because Tim is as safe as he is. So there's that.
Like Captain America, Bucky would always have a gun, which, given the fact he's like 13, is maybe a little troubling, but we digress.
It was the 40s.
Yeah,
Different
there was a
times.
war. There was a war
Actually,
going on.
yeah, actually, I'm gonna switch over to talking about Pyroman now.
Mhm.
So this is your second character, Pyroman,
Yes.
and it's comes out just a year later, like
Hmm.
at the beginning of 1941 is when Black Terror debuts, and then I knew I had it in my notes, but I didn't want to dig through them. But so it's about a year later, and the world has changed. So
Hmm.
at the time that Black Terror debuts, there's no war for America to be involved in. So he's going up against crime. When Pyroman is introduced, then his origin is all about the war.
Hmm.
I don't know if
Sorry, go
you
ahead.
plan on talking about that, but
Well,
his
in his very
origin
first
is
issue, like
very tied into
saboteur,
that.
in his very
Right.
first issue, like he's framed for murder by saboteurs who are like blowing up a airplane manufacturing plant or something. Like from the very first story, he's fighting like saboteurs and Nazis, and we eventually get to supervillains at a certain point. But he was definitely a very like wartime superhero. And actually, the way that I came to the character Pyroman is when I was younger, there was this great book that talked about sort of drawing superheroes,
Mm.
but because you can't just sort of, or maybe they were just being cheap, they used a lot of golden age images to sort of illustrate their points. And one of them is Pyroman sort of like punching a Nazi and like denting his helmet, and he's like all blazing with energy. And that was
Ah,
my first introduction to the character. And it was so dynamic and interesting. It completely hooked me. And then I did some digging on Google and actually found out about him.
nice. I was gonna ask how you chose Pyroman. Well,
Mhm.
I have read some Black Terror. I've read even less Pyroman, so I know less of the character to contribute to this one. I have read the first story like you did, and I will point out that even before he becomes Pyroman, it's about the war because
Mhm.
he is designing a special dynamo for the war
Mhm.
effort. So,
Absolutely.
so from page one, his character is all about that because this is the focus of the times now. So
Absolutely.
Pyroman will eventually face crime and he'll eventually face supervillains, right? But there's this overwhelming presence of the war from the get-go that Black Terror will also adopt. I mean, he's going to fight spies too.
Mhm.
Everyone winds up doing this eventually. Even
Oh yeah.
Batman with his Rogues Gallery has his war-related comic books that come out. There was even a whole hardcover reprint volume of just his war stories. So there
Oh,
is it's out there. I think they did one for Batman and Superman, just
that's really
reprinting the war stories. Uh, but um, but yeah, do you want to talk about the kind of foes that Pyroman fought? What are you aware of from him? Does he have
cool.
a recurring rogue?
Not to my knowledge, or
Are you
nobody
going
like.
to invent one?
Sorry.
Are you going to invent one?
Um, TBD. I am sort of. I'd love to create like a recurring villain for him, but of course, the first issue will have to sell a bit better for. Will have to sell well for us to do that. But
Gotcha.
I like sort of villains of the week or him fighting saboteurs or Nazis. There doesn't necessarily need to be like an overarching villain, but I think it really does help sort of create a world for your superhero if they have like a recurring villain. Like the Black Terror has Lady Serpent, and oh, he had this one villain called the Puzzler who had like this checkered green and yellow and black costume. He's basically the Riddler, but he's
Mm.
not.
Hmm.
And that was a lot of fun. Uh,
The two characters have very different artists.
mm,
The Black Terror was originally drawn by, my notes say, Gabrielson. And we know
mhm,
very little about David Gabrielson. Apparently, he drew the first 14 Black Terror stories. Then he disappears in 1943, probably serving in the war. He comes back from the war. He draws two Kid Eternity stories for Equality Comics in 47, and then he disappears from comic books forever. A little bit of a mystery. I wasn't able to find anything else about him. But of course, Black Terror gets handed off to a lot of other important artists. You mentioned Mort Meskin, to my extreme excitement.
Really interesting about some of like Black Terror's like early appearances is they were written by some pretty like top tier people. Like we said this off mic initially, but some of the Black Terror comics that are uncredited, like there's no writer sort of credited, were written by Patricia Highsmith, who sort of wrote like Strangers on a Train and like The Talented Mr. Ripley. Like she went on to write some very critically acclaimed novels, and she got her start like working in the Nedor bullpen. And I've read a few of the ones that are supposedly by her, and it's very impressive for sort of golden age comics. They're written just like a little bit better than the ones that aren't. There's a great quality to them.
Do you think that she had more to prove, or is this just talent shining through?
I think a bit of both, probably.
Nice. I'll definitely have to search out those issues then, so I get to work on those next. I'm glad that you shared that. I am really impressed by the pedigree of the writers and artists that worked on Black Terror. They knew that that was their top tier character, and they really poured the talent into it to make it worthwhile. If only they could have afforded to do that. And then Pyroman, though, is drawn originally and I think longer by Jack Binder. And Jack Binder is also a big name in comics. He was a very prolific artist. And did you want to talk more about him?
I mean, I'm definitely not an expert on the man by sort of any extent, but I'm very impressed with his work. He co-created Stan Lee's first superhero, the Destroyer, who almost nobody has heard of these days. But
the name's been thrown around a lot.
The Destroyer was a superhero created by Stan Lee, sort of a darker, more vigilante type character that would fight Nazis and such. And he co-created him with Jack Binder, who was the artist. Jack Binder also created the Lev Gleason Daredevil, who I love, with the red and the blue costume and the boomerangs. Also, just in my research into him, apparently he's credited with coining the term zero gravity.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
I mean,
that'd be pretty cool.
I don't know 100% if it's true, but if it is, that's amazing.
It is. Now, Jack was also part of this famous family too. His brother is Otto Binder, who is even more famous in comic books. He's the writer guy. So I would have thought that would come from Otto instead of Jack, but it's possible that Jack did that.
Yeah. I mean, again, this is just from what research I found, but I could be wrong, absolutely. But I know Jack Binder had a studio in the 40s that had a lot of artists working under it, and they worked on characters like Fighting Yank and Mr. Scarlet, Ibis the Invincible, and of course, like the Black Owl, who is I find him a really interesting public domain character, the Black Owl. Not because like his initial adventures are like super interesting, but because he's been revived so many times in the present day. Like, I know at least 3 different people who are currently working on Black Owl revival books.
Man, yes. Let's bring this back. So Pyroman has a different power set. Black Terror has a chemistry founded set of powers, but Pyroman is also science based. He's based on electricity. And I think this is interesting that they had to find a way to make electricity work to give you powers. Because the trick to explaining superpowers is coming up with a way to make science sound rational when it's not. Like in the 60s, they could use radiation for this because they figured not a lot of people understood radiation. And nobody really understands how chemistry works. But electricity, basically everybody understands electricity doesn't give you powers, it just shocks you or kills you. So to make this character work, what they had to do was they created that this is a special dynamo that Pyroman was exposed to, so that when he was electrocuted, it like mutated him, not because electricity does this to people, because everyone knows it doesn't, but because of the dynamo that it was used, then that is how he got his powers. do you want to talk about the science of the characters at all, or maybe some examples of how Pyroman uses his powers?
I mean, one of the reasons why I probably like Pyroman a bit more than the Black Terror, just personally, I like how they definitely fudge it a little bit, but how like he flies by manipulating radio waves and magnetic currents, which I thought was pretty interesting because I think that's how Magneto flies. And
Correct.
he also
That's
can create like electric force fields to like stop bullets, and he can of course like shoot energy out of his hands. And also he's listed as being able to create electromagnetic pulses. And I think that's really interesting because it wouldn't really be something that would be huge in the 40s, but if you can control electricity, a modern day interpretation could really make use of that, like the ability to create like an EMP, disable all technology in a certain area. That would be very dangerous, especially like depending on who you're fighting.
I'd
Cyborg
be
would be.
very surprised if that concept came up in the 40s. I don't think I've ever seen that in a comic book until late 80s at the very earliest, because
Yeah.
it seemed like even in the 70s, writers didn't really understand how electricity worked. That if you pumped electricity into Iron Man's costume, that's not going to necessarily make him stronger. It's probably just going to shut down a lot of circuits.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's comic books for you. I always default to the Stan Lee's classic phrase, which was either research the heck out of it or be so vague that no one can ever pin you down.
nice. And
It's a good
that's
rule of
definitely
thumb.
works. That definitely works with these characters, doesn't it? They're intentionally vague on what they can do and what their limits are, and even what their weaknesses are.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to you shared your favorite Jack Binder character. I was gonna to try to share mine, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
still not entirely sure what it would be. There's a couple really obscure characters that I think I'm gonna give a shout out to from Jack Binder.
Mm-hmm.
There's a character called Press Guardian who had like one or two appearances in Puck Comics that I thought was a really cool idea for a vigilante because he's a vigilante that is only interested in defending the press. It's kind of a limited concept, but it's also a cool concept at the same time.
Very specific.
Very specific, like a vigilante called Litterbug that only goes after litter bugs,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. But then there's also a character called Lee Granger Jungle King from Fawcett that I think is interesting because he's one of those Tarzan clone type characters, but he doesn't just go after poachers and stuff like that. There's actual like mythological creatures existing in his jungle world that he goes up against. So it's like next level Tarzan. And
Very
I wish
cool.
that, yeah, I think that's a really cool concept that more could have been done with, and it didn't really.
Unfortunately, wasn't to be.
Yeah. Right. So, anything else that we haven't covered that you wanted to toss in here for our discussion today? Well,
Um.
let's have you talk a little bit more. We've already dropped lots of clues about this that you are writing
Yes.
a Pyroman comic book. Why don't we talk about that more explicitly now?
Oh, sure. And don't worry, I won't fill this up too much with shameless self promotion. But what really got me back into sort of just reading like the original Pyroman comics and why he's sort of been on my mind is one of the various comic companies I work for, Grok Comics. They love public domain characters and they love sort of rebooting them or reviving them. They have this series just called like basically revivals. And I just asked, hey, can I do Pyroman? I like the character and I'd like to take a shot at it. So this is sort of going to be our reboot or reimagining of the character, but I'm trying to sort of stay as close as I can to the original character's roots. Like Dick Martin, the original Pyroman, does appear in this story, and it's going to be sort of about how he sort of creates the new Pyroman for the new generation, who's going to be this young guy named Jack Desai, who I named Jack in honor of Jack Binder, creator of the
Nice,
original
nicely
Pyroman.
done.
And I don't want to give away too much, but The issue is
So is this going to be available soon enough that I can put a link to it in the comment section, or is this still a ways off from being published?
TBD. The art is all done. It's all dialogued, lettered. We're just waiting for the colorist to get it back to us, but that we're not sure about that at the moment. Just getting a chance to mention it on the show is more than enough for me. Thank you so much for just talk about it.
Of course.
And I'll make sure you get a copy at some point when it does come out.
Thank you so much. Thank you for talking with me today, Ray. It's been a lot of fun. I think we strayed off topic a bit, but it was time well spent. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching, everybody.
Take care.
Check out his book when it comes out, and come back to my videos when I go back to talking about the history of comic books. We're diving way back to 1938 when I pick up talking about them. So see you then, and bye-bye.